Welcome to the Organizational Transformation Kung Fu Podcast with your hosts, Sandi and Jennifer Long.
Hello, and welcome to Organizational Transformation Kung Fu, also known as OT Kung Fu, where we get together every month and talk about organizational leadership, management, and team challenges that executive coaches and consultants come across, and some thoughts on how to deal with those. What do we need to practice and have discipline around? Hence the Kung Fu reference. I am your host, Jennifer Long, and I'm excited to be here. I'm an executive coach in Denver, Colorado, and I'm with my co-host, Sandi executive coach and consultant in Toronto, Canada. Hello, Sandi.
Hey, Jen. How are you today?
I am good. How are you?
I'm so good. Yeah, excellent.
Excellent. So we have a very exciting topic today because it involves something all of our listeners are doing right now.
Hopefully.
But we're going to see how well, because today's topic is listening.
Yeah. And when we were talking about doing this podcast, we thought it was a great idea. And I did a session last week with a group that this just highlighted to me how important listening is for getting results. Because with this particular group, they were all present in the Zoom room because we're still Zooming everything, but they weren't listening to one another. They were so poised to make a comment that they couldn't listen. And so we really want to dig into why listening is such an important part of communication. So I was thinking about this topic, and I do have a research that from Wright State University that says effective listening, the average person listens to about 25% effectiveness at any given time. So what's happening in that other 75% of time?
What are we doing? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's an interesting statistic.
Yeah. So communication, right? So we can learn to be better listeners. But let's get there. Let's talk about why it's an important part of communication.
Right. So when we sort of prepped up on this, the reason we chose this topic is because professionals, executives, leaders, and whatnot, right? This is, other than the level of self-awareness, your ability to listen is a huge part of your effectiveness as a leader. And because a lot of them are only listening at 25%, what does that mean? What are the implications of that? And how do you increase that percentage? And what do you need to do? And how do you do it, right? One of the concepts that I think about when I think about people who listen and listen well, they are what you call present.
Mm-hmm.
And people who are fully present in a conversation is very rare. And it can feel a little bit intense for people because I think we are so accustomed to not really being heard at the kind of level that we could be.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because we talk a lot and on this podcast, many times we talk about children and kind of aligning things with children. And we think about when your children are young and you do spend a lot of time actually listening and hearing what they say, because it's very important, right? As you're rearing these little minds. But that gets so lost over time where they become teenagers and we don't listen quite as much because now they're just a pain in the, and then that comes into the workplace where we're only listening to a portion of things because we have so many other things to go on. And I always think, we talked in our last podcast about kindergarten being, effective way to create creativity and play. And yet that gets lost, and effective listening gets lost as we get older. And so how do we bring that back? How do we be present with everybody that we're working with and having to listen to,
right?
To create more effectiveness.
Right. And so presence. So when you think about listening, and there's all different kinds of listening, right? We have titles for it. We have active listening, we have advanced listening, we have, right? All these sort of ways we describe it. And when I think about being present, it's listening when you are really listening at a high percentage. It's a total body experience.
Yeah.
It's not just my ears that are activated. My eyes are activated. I'm looking, I'm watching, and what am I looking at? What am I watching for? Right? We are what's this is the whole area of nonverbal communication. What's happening in front of me is giving me all sorts of additional information, right? The rate at which somebody speaks, their tone, their pitch, their cadence, all of that is part of what's going on. And how receptive am I internally? Meaning, am I already having fomenting the answers or
Hmm.
responses? Is my
Hmm.
brain preoccupied with what I need to say next? Or am I allowing space to really understand what I'm taking in, right? What am I seeing? What am I hearing? What are the nonverbals? What's my body language? How is it making me feel? Right? The emotional intelligence part of communication is very much about, am I in tune with what this person has said and how it's made me feel? Because I think real communication isn't just the content of the conversation, right? When we think about conversations we've had or recounting something, we don't necessarily remember what they said.
Hmm.
We remember how we felt about what they said.
Exactly, exactly. So as executive coaches, we're trained to be expert listeners because we have to. And so I don't know how many times I've been in sessions where I'll say something like, "I hear what you're saying, but I noticed you did this movement. What does that mean?" And it takes us down this whole other road, but it really, because you were listening so intently to what they were saying, it's not always about the words. It's not. You're talking about the body language and what we're taking and how we're feeling, and having people dig a little deeper to
Right.
get past just the words, right?
Right. It's like, I hear what you're telling me, but you sound really anxious and
Yes.
frustrated. Right. So the skill that I teach in one of my communication courses is all about advanced listening, which is
Hmm.
hearing the emotional content, right? When people are, or they don't answer your questions, right? You're in a coaching session, you ask a question and they take you down another road,
Yeah.
and you always come back and you're like, okay, I see where we went, but I want to understand why you avoided the question.
Right. Right. And you can't do that if you're not listening, because listening advanced at an advanced level, that you're not taking in the full experience, because you will go down with them to their answer of the question that you didn't ask and continue on, and they don't have to answer what you're asking of them, and they're
Right.
deflecting, or for whatever reason, right? And
Right.
so within organizations, we find that because people aren't listening, because people have their own agendas, because they need to get work done and we don't have the time for certain things, all these engagement surveys and things that say that our communication isn't good, if we only started with listening and really taught people how to engage at a much higher level within the listening, I think engagement would go up exponentially.
Well, right. Because part of engagement is, question number whatever. And the Gallup thing is do my opinions count? Well, did you even hear me?
Hmm.
Right. It's not
Yeah,
that maybe my opinion didn't count, is that no one cares about my opinion because they weren't listening to me.
that's right. Because they've already formulated their opinion on what I was saying or whatever it might be.
Yes,
And so,
I'm busy judging you, right? And that's one of the huge barriers to being an effective listener, is
mhm,
when you sit in judgment, right? You don't listen to understand, you listen to judge.
mhm,
Do I need this idea? Do I care about this thing? Is this important to me right now? Right? Where you're judging what it's all about and not really um, trying to uncover or discover what the communication's about.
right, right. One of the things that I find with a lot of the leaders that I um, work with is they'll say, I have an open door policy, which is fantastic, right? You do want to have open communication with people, but what I find is that because people come in and just kind of spew something at you with your open door policy, and if your head isn't in it because you're in the middle of doing a spreadsheet or something like that, that you may have an open door policy, but you're not listening to people. And so it's better to have I don't know what you'd call it, a open door policy between 1 and 3, where you'll just take the time to actually listen to what people say, versus just having this willy-nilly open door policy and people aren't being heard.
Right? I have an open door is just a way of saying, you tell me what you want, but it doesn't mean I'm 100% engaged and ready to listen to what you have to tell me.
Right.
And that's a whole other thing. And there are so many tells that give people away, right? Oh yeah, come on and sit down. I'm just going to answer this email while we talk, right?
Yeah.
Multitasking, which is just in terms of listening. You cannot, multitasking to me is not a thing. It's just not a thing. Your brain is moving from one thing to the next thing. And all you're doing is if I'm good at multitasking, it means you can do it at speed, but you cannot give your full attention. You can't
parse out your brain power, for sure. What's the other thing that really gets in the way is your cell phone, right?
Yes.
So I'm just going to listen to you while I'm reading the text on the side of my desk because that just came through.
Yes.
Put your phones away when you're listening to somebody.
Yes. Yes, because you actually, when you look to your phone and read the sentence, you've left the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Effectively,
and to your
left
point,
the conversation.
Your point about eye contact, what did the person who is giving you some information, what do they see? Your eyes leave them and go down to the phone. So they know now that you're not present.
Exactly.
And you can't hide it.
Exactly. And it's annoying. I mean, you've had people who've probably said, yeah, I'll just wait until you're done. Because they can tell, right? They can tell when you've disengaged, when your mind's gone somewhere else. And because it's a full body experience, it's physical. It can be exhausting, right? If you're doing performance reviews and, God love you people who stack them up all week long. I'm doing reviews all week. It's exhausting.
Back, a day.
If you intend to have a meaningful performance review, which 98% of them are not, I'm sorry, up your game, people. You need to be fully present in that to really hear what people have to say about how they feel about what they're doing and where they're going and who they want to be.
Yes. And then what do you do with that? So allowing people to know that you've actually heard them, the skill of reiterating what I heard you say was, we're going to co-create your development plan of where, what you want to be, of who you want to be.
Yeah.
So let's do it together. And this is what I think we should do. What do you think? And having that conversation as opposed to, a two-way conversation.
Right. It should be energizing, but it might be disarming because if you have for years shown up and been like, here's what you need to go do. And here's what I'm thinking, they're showing up to get the syllabus, right? They're not really there to participate.
Yeah.
And suddenly when you start to listen, participation is required. Thinking is required. And then people have to engage, right? I need to think about this or answer you or respond into what your questions are to discover, okay, oh God, they're really interested. They really want to know, right?
Yeah.
And some people can be taken aback by, I wasn't prepared for that.
Sure. Because they probably never had it for a very long time.
Because I didn't expect to have to do that.
Yeah. And so one way, I guess you could let people know if you're going to try on this listening is to say, we're going to have a session. Let's say it's about performance review, but I'm going to be fully present and I'm going to be really listening to what you have to say so that we can co-create something that's really spectacular for you next year. But you need to also be prepared to show up and to fully participate.
Yeah.
I wonder if that conversation before, you sit down to have your performance review would change the narrative a little bit, change the feeling behind it, change the...
And rule number one, like if you've ever done a crucial conversations course or whatever, there's pre-work involved and you want people to know what to expect when they show up in the room. We're going to have a full-on conversation and these are the things we're going to talk about. And I want you to be prepared to talk to that.
Yes.
Because I'm going to be prepared to listen. And so setting the agenda for yourself to hold yourself accountable that this is not just a information download session. This is a conversation and a dialogue, right? As you were talking about that, another example popped into my head relative to when you hold an all hands meeting or you're doing some kind of an alignment effort as an executive. And that too is a dialogue. And I think there's a tendency to present and
Mm-hmm.
not to dialogue.
Right.
And I think part of the fear is people will ask questions I cannot answer, or they will ask politically hot questions, or
Mm-hmm.
they will, or all of the things we are afraid of in
Yeah.
dialogue at any level. And
That we
so
can't control.
so we shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And those are great opportunities to really listen
Mm-hmm.
and repeat back, here's what I'm really hearing you ask. Here's what I'm
Right.
getting. Here's what's coming through in your question that maybe you didn't articulate. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that when people stand up and try and use a forum to have a conversation, right? Those are I think some really good opportunities to hear things maybe you don't want to hear,
Mm-hmm.
but how you show up in that I'm hearing, this is what I'm really hearing, and I'm taking that on.
And what you do with it
Yes.
tells them whether you were heard them or not. I facilitated an all staff meeting with a union back last month,
Mm,
and I said to the executive team last week, I know that you heard them, but your actions aren't showing that you heard them. So I know that you listened. I know that you heard, but you're not promoting action so they don't know that you've heard. So maybe that didn't make any sense, but I know that they did hear them, but they're
yeah.
not putting the actions together. So the people that were taking the time passionately to speak about what they needed, they don't feel as though they were heard.
Right. Right. Which, gosh, right? There's a whole lot of this union negotiation thing going on right now. It seems like we've got grocery stores that are on strike right now.
Hmm.
And those are critical.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's politics involved in that. And there's all these layers of this and that and the other.
Sure.
But the advantage of the hearing is also the advantage of, have I got it clear?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I've got it clear, I can do something with that.
And even if you're not going to do something with it, to be able to say, I heard you, but we're unable to do that because of this reason.
Yeah.
That's enough as well. It doesn't mean that you have to always put things into action.
You don't have to agree.
No,
Yeah.
you don't have to agree at all.
Yeah.
And so I think, active listening is kind of about what's not done as well as what is done.
So what are the other tells of when people aren't really listening? We've talked about multitasking, right?
Mm-hmm.
What else gets in the way?
I think when they're ready to speak first, they have in their head that what they want to say. So you're not listening because you want to make sure that you're heard what your words are, and so you're just waiting
Right.
to spew something out.
Right. Yeah. You get to the end of your sentence, and when you take a breath, I'm jumping in.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because I've heard enough. Let me respond to what I want to tell you.
Yeah.
Right. So then it becomes all about what I need to tell you, not what you need to, not what only what I've heard. I'm selectively hearing. Right.
That's right. Which was what conversations will go around in circles when that happens, because everybody wants airtime and nobody's listening to anybody.
My favorite one is interrupting. When people interrupt the whole, yeah. Let me tell you. And they just jump in. Right. That is such a disheartening, disengaging experience.
Yes. Yeah. But one of those things that I don't know if it's easily changed, but if you're an interrupter, and you're listening to us today, it's like, what can you do is before you write something down on a piece of paper before so that you can say it later. Just get it out of your brain.
Yeah.
And or if you find that you're an interrupter, like pinch yourself every time you interrupt somebody so that you know that you're doing it. Right?
Yeah. And sometimes when there's the interruption of, I need to get my point across, and it can be a power play. It can be a sense of, let me control the conversation. It can be, interruptions used in so many ways. There's also the interruption in when you're building ideas, right? It can be out of excitement and anticipation as well. And I think that while one maybe isn't as negatively impacting, it's still allowing people to complete a sentence, form an idea, right? It's a courtesy, it's a connection, and it also says you're paying attention, right? I've stopped paying attention when I've started having my own ideas.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's not that you're not going to have the idea. Write it, like Sandy says, write it down. Hold
Write it
that
down.
thought. Put a pin in it.
I do as a coach all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the reason as coaches we take notes.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a discipline to not interrupt. Because you could be having all kinds of thoughts as they're walking you through a scenario where you want to ask a question, know something to answer, you have an idea, or you want to bring something to the table, and you just like put a pin in it, write it down, write it down, write it down. My notes have little boxes and stars and things. Oh, this is an idea. Come back to this thing, right? Note to self. As the conversation progresses.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So interrupting is certainly another aspect. What's another one?
I think another indicator of not listening is a lack of empathy. Right? When people are, okay, thanks for coming in. I hear you.
Not.
I hear you. I don't care.
Yes.
Is that empathy? And I remember talking about this in one of the earlier podcasts. I don't know what we were on about. Maybe it was just empathy in and of itself. Empathy triggers mirror neurons in the brain and takes you out of judgment and puts you in curiosity. And curiosity to me is the biggest skill to stay in a mindset of curiosity when you are engaged with people. What's happening? Why are they saying that? What's that body language about? Right? Why is this so important? Why is this making me feel this way? Keeps the openness of really what's happening and what you're really picking up, because there is so much going on between people in a conversation that if you are, and this is why I'm always like, text is not a conversation.
No.
Text is information that goes back and forth.
It's
not dialogue. Because I paint everything you text me with how I see you, how I think about you, how I feel about you, regardless of how many emojis you put on it.
What? You're in judgment over text?
All right. Because that's where you go. Because that's what you're left with, is just this very small, I have to fill in all the nonverbal. I have to fill in, right, the cadence, the pitch, the tone, all of that. And
That's right.
What do I feel? I fill it in with my perception and understanding about you. How I feel about you is how I paint your text.
Yes. Yeah. And so, you bring up such a good point, because so much of our communication now is via email, and so much of our communication is via text. We don't use phones anymore, so there's a voicemail. We've got Zoom, which is a little bit better because you can still see some body language, but only from the neck up. You don't really know what's going on with the rest of them. You don't know if they're slumping in their chair or not. But because it's easier to send a quick email, it's so much easier to send a quick text, that we don't engage in active listening as much as we used to, probably at one point. And so it's really a discipline that organizations, to be good, to have better engagement, to have stronger leaders, has to really, a discipline they have to relearn.
Exactly. And leadership is a relationship, and relationships are conversations. Period. End of sentence. And if you are email heavy, you've lost the art. You've lost the art of good communication.
Yeah.
Because emails are a transfer of information. They're not a conversation. And that is which is the whole point of this podcast. If you want to get better, pick up a phone at a minimum, because then you at least get a lot of the nonverbal cues in the conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
Turn your cameras on. Now they've talked about Zoom fatigue and blah, 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 blah. Well, okay. So mitigate that by how often you're in a meeting on Zoom with the camera, but you're not going to get the nuance. And if you get an email and you're triggered by it, check your head.
Yes.
I got your email.
What's the bias?
I've interpreted this with a lot of anger and tone. And am I reading it correctly? right? If somebody is at the end of, I'm just sending it to you, and so you're the target of this thing, that pick it, turn it into a conversation.
Yeah. Yes.
Don't accept it. And this is where miscommunication is very much a product of not listening. And miscommunication and communication is because of the same things, right? You have to, what did you mean? What was the intention?
Yeah.
Right. And here's what I heard.
Right. Oh, yeah. But to start with how it affected you, right? Because you can't own, if their intent was malicious, you can't own that. But you can let them know how it made you feel and have them a chance to say, oh my gosh, I didn't mean it that way. I was in a hurry. Maybe they were multitasking, as we've just said, don't do.
Yeah.
But allow them to defend themselves or at least acknowledge it. And but that again takes time, and that takes a bit of courage to say, gosh, I didn't receive that email all that well.
Right. And it takes on your part a willingness to not judge it.
Yes.
To not write it off and just assume that guy's an idiot. I don't know, your days are numbered, brother. Like whatever those reactions are when you get triggered is to really kind of go, why am I judging it this way?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times these kind of email conversations, it's when things are going pear-shaped and people are shooting emails back and forth, right? That where things get hot and misunderstood and everything breaks down. And then, we need better communication.
Yeah. You got to stop. Somebody has to stop the madness is really what it boils down to.
Right. Right. And so this is always an interesting thing is when you look at how people perform and show up, it's, if it's your relationship to own, right?
Mm-hmm.
If your team sucks, what's broken between you and those other people? And are you communicating fully, right? And that means, are you really listening? And are they really listening so that you guys can be clear around how you need to work together, whatever the issue is between you? Because it's the stuff between that falls over. And we just assume because we're all working remotely, this is just how it is now.
No. Well, it is, but it doesn't have to be.
But your relationship is your relationship is your relationship.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what form it takes.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing to make it a positive, working, productive relationship?
Right.
If that's your intention. If you don't like the person and you don't want it to be, well, by all means, just send them nasty texts. But
no, we don't advocate for that either.
That's not going to improve anything. And shame on you.
But we want you, the listener, to know that the choice is yours, right? Active listening is a skill that we don't employ a lot. It's 25% efficiency. You can change that. You can change that to 50% or 75%, but it requires some courage. It requires some time. It requires no multitasking, energy.
It's physical. You should notice a difference when you've come out of a conversation where you've really listened.
Yes. And so, put it the basic workday, Zoom call after Zoom call or meeting after meeting after meeting. Can you actively listen meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting if there's no downtime in between? So really thinking about how your day is structured. Mm-hmm. And are you structuring your day to be at your optimal for people to be heard? So taking a step back and taking stock in how you're creating space to be actively listening.
And we forget about simple things like decision fatigue, right? Where we're in a meeting at the end of the day and we're supposed to be making decisions about stuff and we've been in meetings all day. It's like, we're not going to make a decision. We're all just too tired.
And I just want to have dinner. I just want to go home. I want to know what the kids have done all day, right? I don't care.
I want to get out of this chair.
Yes.
Yeah. So this plays into mindfulness, paying attention. Really, if we've taken the time to take stock of our lives based on the last 2 years, we've all had to shift everything and have been forced to evaluate. This should have been part of that evaluation. Am I really connecting? Right? As managers, we're all worried about the remote work and am I really connecting and how am I holding the space for people, et cetera. Those are all listening things. And so that should be part of what you've started to reorganize for yourself and pace yourself. And if your meeting paces are too intense, what are you doing about that?
Mm-hmm. Right. Do you have to be at every meeting? Like, there's all that willingness of people to attend, but no, very seldom people say, do I really need to be at this meeting? I got an invite, must go.
Does this meeting add value?
Mm-hmm. Or will I add value being in it?
And yeah, I mean, is there value for me in showing up there? And what is that value? Sometimes it's just political value. Sometimes it's
Sure.
just right where I don't really have to say anything, but if I'm not there, that sends a message I don't want to convey.
Yes.
Versus, am I just on the invite because people think I need to be in the know? But I have 2 minutes of dialogue in there, and I'm done, and then I'm watching everybody else. That to me, those are colossal time burners for people.
They are.
And if you're having those kind of meetings, you really need to reevaluate. And if you stop showing up, what happens?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Experiment with that. Say
Yes.
no, decline it, see what happens.
Yeah. Have a buddy who might be at the meeting who could fill you in.
If I'm
right?
only
There's
doing
always
2
so many
minutes of an update of some kind, can I just send that in? And can
Yes.
somebody else present it? I mean,
Yeah.
what's the value prop? So connection.
Mm-hmm.
Listening is about connection. And if you're feeling disconnected, right? Communication is about being connected. And you're suffering from poor communication, practice the listening.
Mm-hmm. And so, some takeaways will be to practice it for sure, but to observe yourself, how you behave now, right? So think about, after every interaction that you have with someone, take 5 minutes and evaluate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. Did I really give them 100% of myself during this call or just this meeting, this Zoom, whatever it is? And do that a few times to see really how you're showing up, because that's when you recognize it, you can make change.
Right? And what are the things that are creating distractions, right?
Yeah.
What is the distractedness that gets you? So when the phone rings or when the Zoom meeting is on, close the email, shut down the messaging, right? What is going to help you create the focus that you need to have? If you're on site with people, when people come in to talk to you, turn away from your computer.
Mm-hmm.
Come out
That's
from
right.
behind your desk. Like, what is it going to take? Change your physiology.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things you need to do so that you can set yourself up to actually pay attention, to physically be present in the conversation?
Yes.
And sometimes there's a mental trick of when you're learning how to be present is you have to physically say stop.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to stop everything you're doing and shift.
Yes.
The word, the shift, the physical change are all the things that then your brain's going, okay, what are we doing?
Yes.
And then you're in.
Yes.
And so things like that, experiment with what that might be for you.
And we know that people leave managers, not organizations, for the most part. And so, wow, showing up as a leader or a manager, fully listening and fully engaged with your staff, what a difference that will make to yourself, your staff, their happiness, their engagement, your happiness, results.
Yeah.
Like it just has benefits galore.
Will you get better information?
Wow, yes.
Will things be a little more clear? Will you ask better questions? Yes, and yes to all of that.
Get curious.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you said, Jen, you can't be curious if your head isn't in the game. So
that's right.
Get curious.
That's right.
Yeah. And, we're fairly new we're 2 years into a pandemic, but fairly new into a new year. So what a great time to reevaluate yourself as a leader, and reevaluate yourself in your relationships that you have with people, and determine at what level you're showing up for people and actually 100% engaging.
Yeah. And the first time somebody says, wow, you seem a lot more intense, then you know you're doing it right.
Yeah. Then you say, thank you. I'm meaningful in doing this. Right.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm paying 100% attention.
Yes. And that doesn't mean that your eyes have to open really wide and you have to focus on them like an eagle that make them really uncomfortable. Just so you know that, physiologically, you don't have to look weird in order to be actively listening. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Well, good. I think we've hit it all, have we?
I think so. I think so. I think, your point of what leadership is relationship and relationship is our conversations. Is that what we said?
That's what we said.
Yep. That's a huge takeaway, right?
That
It's
is.
all about the conversation and how are you as a leader showing up.
Listening is over half the conversation. Over half.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's close it out and thank everybody for their time today. We appreciate all of you and downloading the podcast. And if you like our podcast, please share it with your friends and colleagues. Please take some time to give us a rating on whatever platform it is you get your podcast from. Thanks again. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone. See you, Jen.
See you, Sandy.
Thank you for listening, and please visit Sandy's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI consultinginc.ca, and Jen's website at managementpossible.com. Thanks again.